never thought I'd see the day when she would be standing at my doorstep, eyes filled with shame, hands trembling, voice barely above a whisper. I should have felt victorious. I should have smirked, relishing the moment she begged. But all I felt was a dull ache in my chest, because just a year ago, I was the one breaking, the one drowning, while she stood on the shore laughing. It started the day I lost my job. Not just any job, my dream job. I had spent years building my career, working late nights, sacrificing weekends, skipping family events, just to prove myself. And then, in a single email, everything was gone. Company downsizing, immediate termination. I still remember the cold numbness that washed over me as I read those words. My hands shook as I refreshed the screen, hoping it was a mistake. But no. My access was revoked. My email deactivated. My time was up. I sat in silence for hours, my mind refusing to process reality. The weight of uncertainty crushed me. How would I pay my bills? What would my family think? Was I a failure? That evening, I forced myself to attend a family dinner. I needed warmth, a distraction, anything to stop my thoughts from spiraling. But Brielle Carter, my sister-in-law, had other plans. She had never liked me. I wasn't sure why, but she always found ways to belittle me. Small jabs, snide remarks, passive-aggressive digs. And that night, she went for the kill. "So, how's the big career going?" she asked sweetly, sipping her wine. I hesitated. My throat was dry. I could feel the eyes of my family on me. I swallowed hard. I lost my job today. For a moment, silence. Then she laughed. Not a nervous chuckle, not a moment of awkwardness, a full-blown laugh like I had just told the world's funniest joke. "Oh my God," she wheezed. "Are you serious? You? Unemployed?" The sting of humiliation burned through me. My ears rang. "That's..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "I mean, I guess some people just aren't cut out for stability." I clenched my fists under the table. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced a smile. "I'll figure something out." She smirked, leaning back in her chair. I mean, it must be so hard, right? Living with no job, no income, you must feel useless. Something inside me cracked. I saw my brother, Tristan Reed, shift uncomfortably beside her, but he said nothing. My parents exchanged glances. No one defended me. No one told her to stop. I felt alone. I barely ate that night. I barely spoke. I excused myself early, but as I walked past her, she whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Don't worry, some people are just meant to struggle." And then she laughed again. That was the night I promised myself. I would rise again. And when I did, I'd make sure she felt the same helplessness she made me feel. But I never thought it would happen so soon. Because now, 1 year later, she stood at my door, her once perfect life crumbling, her voice shaking as she said the words I never expected to hear. I need your help." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her squirm. This was going to be interesting. I didn't move. I didn't invite her in. I just stood there, watching her struggle under the weight of her own words. Brielle Carter, the woman who once mocked me, humiliated me, made me feel worthless, was now on my doorstep, begging. I tilted my head slightly, arms still crossed. "You need my help?" Her lips pressed together, and for a second, she looked like she wanted to deny it, to take it back. But she was desperate. I could see it in her sunken eyes, the way her fingers trembled, clutching her purse too tightly, like she was holding onto the last bit of her dignity. She inhaled sharply. Yes. A year ago, I had stood in front of my family, feeling helpless, small, humiliated while she laughed at my pain. I remembered every single word, every single smirk, every single second of that dinner where she made me feel like I was nothing. And now she was nothing. I let the silence stretch between us, enjoying the way she shifted under my gaze. "What happened, Brielle Carter?" I asked, my voice slow, deliberate. "Where's that confidence of yours? That superiority? The way you mocked me? Where is it now?" Her jaw tightened. I just need a job." I raised an eyebrow. "A job?" She nodded quickly, her eyes darting around like she expected someone to step in and save her. But no one was coming. I leaned against the doorframe. "Why?" She swallowed hard. "Tristan Reed lost his business. The debts? They're bad. We had to sell the house, the cars, everything." Oh, now that was interesting. Tristan Reed, my brother, had always been the golden boy, the one everyone expected to succeed. He had the perfect wife, the perfect life, the perfect career. Meanwhile, I had always been the one struggling, always trying to prove myself. And now the golden boy had fallen. And his wife was standing in front of the man she humiliated, asking for mercy. I should have felt sorry for her, but all I felt was the ghost of my past humiliation, rising like a tidal wave. "You mean to tell me," I said, dragging out my words, "that you, the woman who called me useless, the woman who laughed at my job loss, the woman who said some people were meant to struggle, now you're the one struggling?" She flinched. I smirked. That hit. I wanted her to feel it, to feel what I had felt. She opened her mouth, then shut it. For the first time in her life, she had no witty comeback. I could have ended it right there. I could have told her to get lost, to suffer like I suffered. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted her to break. So I stepped back. "Come inside." Her eyes flickered with surprise, but she followed me in. I led her to the living room, motioning for her to sit. She hesitated before lowering herself onto the couch. She looked uncomfortable. Good. I sat across from her, leaning forward. "So, you want a job?" She nodded quickly. "Anything?" "I'll do anything." The words tasted bitter coming from her mouth. I stared at her, letting the silence hang. Then finally I asked, "Why should I help you?" Her breath caught. This was it. The moment of truth. Would she swallow her pride? Would she admit what she did to me? Or would she lie, manipulate, try to twist the story like she always did? I watched her carefully, waiting. Because whatever she said next would decide how cruel I was willing to be. For a moment, Brielle Carter just stared at me. I could see it, the battle raging in her head. Should she fake remorse? Should she spin a story? Should she beg? I leaned back, arms crossed, waiting. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. She swallowed hard. "I know. I wasn't fair to you before." I raised an eyebrow. "Fair?" I repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's an interesting choice." Her fingers twisted together in her lap. I mean, I know I said things I shouldn't have, but that was a long time ago. A long time ago? A slow laugh escaped me. "Oh, I see. So it doesn't count anymore?" Her face flushed. "That's not what I meant." I cut her off. "Tell me something, Brielle Carter. Do you remember that night? The one where you laughed in my face when I told everyone I lost my job?" Her lips parted slightly. I could see the hesitation, the flicker of panic in her eyes. I tilted my head. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Silence. She wouldn't answer. So I answered for her. "You said, 'Some people are just meant to struggle.'" She flinched. I smirked. That hit. I wanted her to feel it, to feel what I had felt. She opened her mouth, then shut it. For the first time in her life, she had no witty comeback. I could have ended it right there. I could have told her to get lost, to suffer like I suffered. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted her to break. So I stepped back. "Come inside." Her eyes flickered with surprise, but she followed me in. I led her to the living room, motioning for her to sit. She hesitated before lowering herself onto the couch. She looked uncomfortable. "Good." I sat across from her, leaning forward. "So, you want a job?" She nodded quickly. "Anything. I'll do anything." The words tasted bitter coming from her mouth. I stared at her, letting the silence hang. Then finally I asked, "Why should I help you?" Her breath caught. This was it. The moment of truth. Would she swallow her pride? Would she admit what she did to me? Or would she lie, manipulate, try to twist the story like she always did? I watched her carefully, waiting. Because whatever she said next would decide how cruel I was willing to be. For a moment, Brielle Carter just stared at me. I could see it, the battle raging in her head. Should she fake remorse? Should she spin a story? Should she beg? I leaned back, arms crossed, waiting. I wasn't going to make it easy for her. She swallowed hard. "I know. I wasn't fair to you before." I raised an eyebrow. "Fair?" I repeated, as if tasting the word. "That's an interesting choice." Her fingers twisted together in her lap. I mean, I know I said things I shouldn't have. But that was a long time ago. A long time ago? A slow laugh escaped me. "Oh, I see. So it doesn't count anymore?" Her face flushed. "That's not what I meant." I cut her off. "Tell me something, Brielle Carter. Do you remember that night? The one where you laughed in my face when I told everyone I lost my job?" Her lips parted slightly. I could see the hesitation, the flicker of panic in her eyes. I tilted my head. "Do you remember what you said to me?" Silence. She wouldn't answer. So I answered for her. "You said, 'Some people are just meant to struggle.'" She flinched. I leaned in, my voice calm but cutting. "So tell me, are you meant to struggle now, Brielle Carter?" Her breathing hitched. For the first time in her life, she had no power, no control. And she knew it. She exhaled shakily. I didn't mean it like that." I laughed again. A dark, humorless laugh. "Oh, of course not. You only meant it when you were standing on the top looking down at me. But now that the roles are reversed, it's different, right?" Her fingers tightened around the fabric of her dress. "Please," she whispered. There it was. The word I had wanted to hear. She was pleading. I let the silence stretch, watching her squirm, watching her drown in the same humiliation she once threw at me. Then slowly, I leaned forward. "I'll consider it." Her head snapped up. You will?" I shrugged. "Maybe." I stood up, walking towards the kitchen. "But first, I want to hear you say it." She blinked. "Say, what?" I turned, my expression blank. "Say what you did to me." Her body stiffened. I waited, her hands curled into fists on her lap. She hated this, hated feeling small, hated having to admit she had been cruel. But she needed me. "So, after a long pause, she whispered, 'I mocked you.'" I raised an eyebrow. "Louder." Her throat bobbed. "I mocked you," she said again, her voice trembling. "I laughed at you when you lost your job." I nodded slowly. "And?" Her lips parted, confusion flashing across her face. I took a step closer. "And I want to hear you say that you were wrong." Her whole body tensed, like she was being forced to swallow something bitter. I said nothing. I just watched her, waiting. Finally, after what felt like forever, she closed her eyes and whispered, "I was wrong." A slow smirk played at my lips. This was just the beginning. I let her words linger in the air, watching the way she clenched her fists in her lap, her nails digging into her own skin. She hated this. Hated being at my mercy. Hated having to say the words. And I wasn't done yet. I took a slow step forward. Say it again. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. What? I tilted my head, keeping my voice calm. Say it again. Look me in the eyes and say it like you mean it. Her jaw tightened. I could almost hear her thoughts screaming. She wanted to fight back. She wanted to roll her eyes, maybe throw in a sarcastic comment. But she couldn't afford to. Not now. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet my gaze. I was wrong. I didn't blink. Wrong about what? Her breath shuddered. Wrong to mock you. To humiliate you. The struggle was written all over her face. She'd spent years tearing me down, and now she was forced to admit she had been nothing but cruel. I let the silence stretch again, making sure she felt the weight of her words. Then, finally, I exhaled and leaned back. All right, I said. I believe you. Relief flickered in her eyes for a split second before I added, but that doesn't mean I'm going to help you. Her whole body stiffened. What? I gave her a small shrug. I just wanted to hear you say it, that's all. Her mouth fell open. She blinked, completely thrown off. But you just said, I said I'd consider it, I corrected. And I did. And I've decided not to. Her lips trembled. You're joking, right? I didn't answer. Because I wasn't. Her breathing grew shaky. Please, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I need this job. I should have felt pity. I should have felt something. But all I felt was the memory of her laughter. You think I didn't need my job? I asked, my voice eerily calm. You think I didn't need someone to stand up for me that night? You humiliated me in front of my entire family, Brielle Carter. And now you expect me to just hand you an opportunity? Her eyes shined with something close to tears. Good. Let her feel what it's like to be powerless. I made a mistake, she whispered. I let out a humorless chuckle. Yeah, you did. She swallowed, gripping the couch like it was the only thing holding her together. But I'm not that person anymore. I smirked. Oh? And what changed? The fact that your husband lost his business? The fact that you have nothing left? Or the fact that the person you once humiliated is now the one holding the power? Her face crumbled. She knew I was right. For years, she had everything. Money, status, a perfect life. And she used it to look down on people like me. But life has a funny way of flipping the script. Now, she was the one sitting in my living room begging me for a chance. I stood up, walking towards the door. We're done here. Her head shot up. Wait. But I had already opened the door. I motioned towards it. Go. Her lips parted, like she wanted to argue. But she couldn't. Because for the first time in her life, she was powerless. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't. She slowly rose to her feet. Shoulders slumped. Humiliation dripping from her like a heavy cloak. She took a shaky step forward, then another. As she reached the door, she turned slightly. I really am sorry. I stared at her. No emotion. No sympathy. Not sorry enough. And with that, I shut the door in her face. I stood there for a moment, my hand still gripping the door handle, my heart pounding in my chest. I had shut the door. I had won. So why did I feel empty? I exhaled sharply, shaking off the thought. Number I wasn't going to fall into that trap. She didn't deserve my pity. She deserved this. Still, something in me wouldn't settle. I walked to the window, pulling back the curtain just slightly. Brielle Carter was still standing on my porch, her hands shaking, her shoulders slumped in defeat. For a second, it almost looked like she might knock again. But she didn't. Instead, she wiped at her face. Was she crying? Before turning and walking away. I let the curtain fall back into place and exhaled, trying to shake off the strange feeling settling in my chest. This wasn't my problem anymore. I should have moved on. I should have gone about my night like nothing happened. But something kept gnawing at me, something I couldn't quite name. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. A text from my brother. "Tristan Reed, what did you say to Brielle Carter?" I frowned. What did I say? I had barely spoken to Tristan Reed in months. After my job loss, after that dinner, we had drifted apart. Or maybe I had been the one to pull away. Either way, we weren't close anymore. And now he was messaging me? I typed back, my fingers moving fast. Me. Why? 3 dots appeared. Then, Tristan Reed. She came home crying, locked herself in our room. Wouldn't talk to me. Just tell me what you did. I stared at the message, my stomach twisting slightly. I hadn't done anything. Not really. I had just given her back what she deserved. But the way he phrased it, like I was the villain. I clenched my jaw, irritation bubbling up. Me. I reminded her of the night she mocked me. That's all. A pause. Then another message. Tristan Reed. She knows she was wrong. You didn't have to break her. Break her? I scoffed, throwing my phone on the table. Oh, now they cared about feelings? Where was this concern when I was humiliated in front of everyone? When I was made to feel worthless? I wasn't going to feel guilty for this. I went about my night, making dinner, watching TV, pretending I didn't care. But deep inside, I felt something shifting. And then, 2 days later, it happened. A knock on my door. I sighed, setting my coffee down. Not again. I pulled the door open, already preparing to tell Brielle Carter to leave me alone. But when I saw who was standing there, it wasn't her. It was Tristan Reed. And he didn't look angry, he didn't look defensive, he just looked exhausted. "We need to talk," he said. I stared at him for a moment before stepping aside, letting him in. He walked past me, running a hand through his hair, his body tense. I folded my arms. "What do you want?" He sighed, looking down before finally meeting my gaze. "I need you to help her." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Help her?" I repeated, shaking my head. "You can't be serious." "She's falling apart," he said, voice quiet. "She hasn't been eating. She barely sleeps. She won't even leave the house." I should have felt nothing. I should have told him that's not my problem. But instead, all I felt was this strange, twisted sense of satisfaction. Because now he knew what it felt like to watch someone you care about break, while the world does nothing. "Not my problem," I said, my voice cold. "She made a mistake," he said, his voice firmer now. "She was horrible to you. I won't deny that. But you," he exhaled, "you got your revenge, didn't you?" Something about the way he said it made my stomach twist. I narrowed my eyes. "What are you trying to say?" He hesitated. Then finally, he said the words that would change everything. "Brielle Carter is pregnant." My heart stopped. Silence. My mind struggled to process it, to make sense of it. Pregnant? Brielle Carter? "She didn't tell you because she didn't want you to think she was using it as an excuse," Tristan Reed continued. "She made mistakes, but she's scared. She needs help. And I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd be the bigger person this time." I stared at him, my emotions colliding. This wasn't what I had expected. I had wanted revenge. But now it wasn't just about her. There was someone else in this equation. Someone innocent. And suddenly, my revenge didn't feel as sweet anymore. I couldn't speak. The words, "Brielle Carter is pregnant," echoed in my head, bouncing around like loose bullets, hitting me in places I hadn't even known were vulnerable. I should have felt nothing. I should have looked Tristan Reed in the eye and said, "Still not my problem." But I didn't. Because now, it wasn't just about Brielle Carter. There was an unborn child, innocent, untouched by all of this. And suddenly, my revenge wasn't as black and white as I had made it out to be. I exhaled slowly, crossing my arms. And what exactly do you expect me to do about it? Tristan Reed ran a hand through his hair, looking as exhausted as he sounded. She needs a job. She needs stability. She needs... I scoffed. She needs. What about what I needed? Where was this concern when I was drowning? Where were you when she laughed in my face? He looked at me, his expression pained. I was wrong. Those 3 words. So simple. Yet they hit something deep inside me. I should have stood up for you, he continued, his voice tight. I should have told her to stop. I should have, I don't know, done something. But I didn't, and I regret it. I clenched my jaw, refusing to let his guilt soften me. Too late for regrets now, don't you think? I know, he admitted, sighing. But this isn't about pride anymore. This isn't about revenge. It's about her health, the baby's health. My chest tightened. I didn't want to care. I really didn't. But I did. Damn it, I did. I turned away, rubbing my temples. She didn't tell me. She was scared, he said. She thought you'd think she was using it to manipulate you. I let out a bitter laugh. And how do I know she's not? Tristan Reed didn't answer. Because we both knew. Brielle Carter was capable of anything. I sighed, pacing the room. So what now? She just needs a job, he repeated. Something. Anything. She doesn't want charity. He hesitated. She just wants to stand on her own feet again. I turned to him, my jaw tightening. And you want me to be the one to help her? Yes. I stared at him, trying to make sense of it all. I had dreamed of this moment, the moment when she would be desperate, when I would be in control. And yet, it didn't feel like I thought it would. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. A long silence stretched between us before I finally spoke. I'll think about it. Tristan Reed exhaled, looking like he had been holding his breath the whole time. That's all I ask. I walked to the door, opening it. Go home, Tristan Reed. He hesitated, then nodded, stepping outside. But before he left, he turned to me one last time. For what it's worth, he said quietly. I know you didn't deserve what she did to you. And I know this doesn't fix it. But if there's any part of you that still remembers the old you, the one who wasn't bitter, who wasn't out for revenge, think about helping her. Not for her sake, not for me. He hesitated, but for the baby. And then he walked away. I shut the door, pressing my forehead against it. For the baby. The words wouldn't leave my head. I had spent so long waiting for this moment, for her downfall. But now I wasn't so sure if revenge was worth it anymore. I barely slept that night. Tristan Reed's words kept replaying in my head, looping over and over like a song I couldn't turn off. Not for her sake, not for me, but for the baby. I hated that it got to me. Hated that some part of me actually cared. Brielle Carter didn't deserve my help. She deserved to feel the same helplessness I had felt. But the baby had done nothing wrong. By morning, I was restless. My mind was at war with itself. One part of me wanted to hold on to my revenge, to let her suffer like she let me suffer. But another part, the part of me I thought had died, felt conflicted. I needed answers. So, before I could overthink it, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to Tristan Reed's place. The neighborhood was nothing like it used to be. Gone was the big house, the fancy cars, the lavish lifestyle. Now they lived in a small apartment complex, the kind where the walls were thin and privacy was a luxury. I knocked on the door. For a second, I thought no one was home. Then slowly, the door creaked open, and Brielle Carter stood there. She looked different. Her hair, usually sleek and perfect, was tied up messily. She had no makeup on, her face pale, dark circles under her eyes. Her clothes hung loosely, like she had lost weight. But it wasn't just her appearance, it was her eyes. They weren't filled with arrogance anymore. There was no smirk, no superiority, just exhaustion. For the first time in my life, Brielle Carter looked fragile. She stared at me in shock. "What are you doing here?" I hesitated. I didn't even know how to answer that. I needed to see for myself, I said honestly. She frowned. "See what?" I looked past her, into the apartment. It was small, barely furnished. A single couch, a dining table with 2 chairs, a few boxes stacked in the corner. This was their reality now. I turned my gaze back to her. "That you're really struggling." Something flickered across her face. Shame. She stepped aside, letting me in without a word. I walked in slowly, taking in everything. This was nothing like the life she used to brag about. "I meant what I said," she muttered, closing the door behind me. "I really do need a job. I wasn't trying to manipulate you." I turned to face her. "And why should I believe that?" She exhaled, gripping the back of the chair. "Because I have nothing left to lie for." Silence. I studied her, trying to find even a trace of the woman who had once laughed in my face. But she wasn't there. Or maybe she had never really been that woman. Maybe she had been hiding behind a mask, pretending to be untouchable, when in reality she was just as vulnerable as anyone else. She sighed, running a hand over her face. "You think I don't regret what I did?" Her voice was quiet now, raw. "You think I don't lie awake at night wishing I could take it back?" I said nothing. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head. "I used to think I had everything. A husband who adored me, a life people envied. And then, just like that, it was gone." I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to keep my emotions in check. This was what I had wanted, wasn't it? To see her break? So why did it feel like I was the one losing? She inhaled shakily, placing a hand on her stomach. That was when it hit me. This wasn't just her downfall. This was her rock bottom. And I was standing here, watching it unfold. I took a slow breath, rubbing my temples. "If I help you, if I give you a job." She lifted her head, eyes wide with hope. I held up a hand, cutting her off. "It's not forgiveness. You don't get to erase what you did. You don't get to act like we're friends." She swallowed hard. "I understand." I stared at her for a long moment. Then finally I spoke. "I'll see what I can do." The relief that flooded her face was instant. But I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for the baby. Because at the end of the day, revenge won't feed a child. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to let go. I should have felt lighter. I had made my decision. I had done the right thing. But as I walked out of that apartment, something still felt off. It wasn't just the way Brielle Carter had looked at me, like I was her last hope. It wasn't just the way her voice shook, the way she clutched her stomach, like she was holding on to more than just a child. No, it was something else. Something I couldn't quite name. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel. This should have been the end. I should have been able to move on, let go of the past, leave it all behind. But then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I frowned, unlocking my screen. The message was short, simple, but the second I read it, a cold chill ran down my spine. Don't trust her. She's lying. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs. I stared at the screen, my fingers tightening around my phone. What the hell? I read it again, and again, my mind racing. Who was this? And more importantly, what was Brielle Carter lying about? Before I could even process it, another message popped up. She's not pregnant. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the car. My pulse pounded in my ears, my fingers numb as I reread the words. Not pregnant? That didn't make sense. Tristan Reed had told me himself. Brielle Carter had acted so desperate, so broken. Had it all been a lie? No, that was impossible. Unless this was just another game. Unless she had played me again. A nauseating realization hit me like a truck. Had I just fallen for the biggest manipulation of all? I didn't think. I just acted. I started my car and drove straight back to Tristan Reed's apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This time, I didn't knock. I banged on the door. It swung open almost immediately, and there she was, Brielle Carter. Her face paled when she saw me. Like she knew. I stepped inside, my eyes locked on her. I wasn't playing anymore. Tell me the truth, I said, my voice low, dangerous. Her lips parted. I don't know what you mean, I cut her off. Are you pregnant? Silence. Her breath hitched, her hands trembled, and in that moment, I knew. I knew the truth before she even said it. The way her throat bobbed, the way she shifted on her feet, the way she couldn't look me in the eye. She had lied. The betrayal hit me harder than any of her past humiliations ever had. Say it, I whispered. Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No pity, no guilt, just cold, burning rage. She exhaled shakily, and then finally, she said it. I'm not pregnant. A slow, bitter laugh escaped me. I dragged a hand down my face, disgust curling in my gut. She had used me. Again. The humiliation I had felt a year ago, the night she mocked me, was nothing compared to this. I had actually believed her. I had actually let her make me question myself. And for what? For another lie. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my wrist. Wait, she whispered. I can explain. I yanked my hand away like her touch burned. Explain? I laughed darkly. You made up a baby, Brielle Carter. She swallowed hard, her face pale. I was desperate. I knew it was the only way I'd what? Help you? Feel sorry for you? I shook my head, exhaling sharply. I should have known. I should have never let my guard down. I took a slow step toward her, my voice eerily calm. Do you know what the worst part is? I asked. She swallowed. What? I was actually going to help you. Her face crumbled. I let out a humorless chuckle, shaking my head. But you just couldn't help yourself, could you? Her eyes welled with tears. I didn't know what else to do. I was scared. No. I cut her off. You weren't scared? You were just the same selfish person you've always been. I turned toward the door, gripping the handle. But before I walked out, I gave her one last look. This? I gestured around the apartment. This is all you have left. Her lips trembled. And now, I exhaled. Now you don't even have my pity. And with that, I walked away. This time, for good. And that, my friends, was just the beginning of an unforgettable story of revenge and betrayal. What would you have done in Tristan Reed's place? Let me know in the comments below. If you loved this story and want more intense revenge dramas, don't forget to like this video. It helps the channel grow and brings more powerful stories your way. Share it with your friends, because trust me, they need to hear this one. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next twist-filled story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay tuned for more mind-blowing stories.